Okay. Maybe it'll work for us. Okay. All right. Next one. Okay, so we're working up to being able to do everything. This is going to ask us for domain, range, increasing, decreasing, constant, positive, or negative, right? So we're doing everything that we've learned so far for this. So let's start with domain. I know those graphs copy really small on that. This is -5 right here. This is +5. This goes up to 10 right here. This right here is at 5, if those points sort of help you with this. So my domain. Domain is my x values. I'm taking my vertical line. I'm thinking about just whether it exists or not right now. So nothing over here. Where does it start? -5. I've got something all the way up to where? +5. You are saying 10. Where are you getting that 10 from? Right here, but that's the y. You have to give the x. So you need to go down here to the 5 right there. So it would be -5 to +5 for that. And I can use brackets because there are closed circles on the ends. Okay? My range. Now, range is the only time you look at your y-axis, right? So range is going to be the only time you look at your y-axis. So range, I'm thinking lowest. What's the lowest I've got? Oh, I heard 5. Is it 5? It is 0 because you're looking at the y-axis. Okay? So this is your lowest point, but you want to go over here to the y-axis for that. So 0 is your lowest y. And then what's the highest y? I'm not tall enough. 10. Goes all the way up to this point right here. And you want to look at the y-axis, so it's 10. So 0 to 10. Okay, so that's domain and range we've already been working on, but we can probably still use a little refreshers on that, right? Now, if we're talking about increasing or decreasing, which one do we have here? Do we have both on this one, or
just decreasing?
Just what?
Decreasing.
Which side do we have to start on, Eddie?
That side.
Left. So if I go from left to, if I'm on this roller coaster, am I increasing or decreasing?
Decreasing. I was looking at 7.
Oh, okay, yeah. 7
Yeah.
is going to be decreasing, yes. But for this one's always increasing for the whole domain. So increasing is just the same as the domain, -5 to 5. You're looking at the x-axis. Don't look at the y-axis on anything except for range, okay? So for decreasing, we would just say none. This one does not decrease ever. Okay? When we're thinking about positive and negative, we want to think about where that x-axis is at. Okay? And we're looking for where this positive, we're looking above the x-axis. Negative, we're looking below the x-axis. Is it ever negative? No. Is it positive everywhere? Almost. There's one little tiny thing you got to think about right here. At this point right here, okay, the coordinates of that point are -5, 0. And we said to be positive, you have to have a positive y coordinate. Is 0 positive?
Yes.
0 is not positive. If you have $0 in your bank account,
I'm broke.
then you don't have any money in your bank account. It's not positive, right? It's not negative. At least you don't owe somebody some money. But you haven't overdrawn your account. But if you got 0, it's not positive, right? So 0 is neutral. It's not positive nor negative. So we're not going to include that point, right? So that means we're going to use a parentheses right there for the -5. Because if it's the point where it actually touches the x-axis, it's not positive or negative. Okay, it's neither. So we don't include it. But we do include the +5 because right here, we're not positive yet, but we're almost positive, right? And then as soon as we go past this, we're positive, 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 until until we get over here to 5, and it just ends for that. So -5 to 5. But as you guys said, we don't have any negative here, right? 0 is not negative either, so we would just say none for that. Okay? All right. I'm going to do an arrow so it doesn't look like negative none. All right. So I want you guys to try 7. Try 7. Yes, let's see. Right here is 10. Here's 4. Here's 6. So that's going to be at 5 in between. That should be a closed circle. It's not very big. You can't see it. So I think that should be good enough for you. So find all 6 things we're looking for here. Domain range, increasing, decreasing, positive, negative.
So it starts at 0.
I'll take this and I'll put it in for you. Okay, so you're going to think about like the lowest that you are, right? So does it exist way down here? It does. So negative is up to where's the yeah, so like here, things like y'all know the lowest and highest here. Yeah, here, but it obviously keeps on going. So that'd be like down here at negative infinity. And this one, don't actually go over because it's right there at y. So it's not there. These weren't on the line. These would go over for those. This one, we would go over here and do it all right there. Does that make sense? Your domain and range would be okay if it didn't stop right here. But it keeps on going. So instead of stopping, we're going to go to infinity. Right here. Instead of starting at 0 right here. Same thing with the range. Yeah. Yeah. Alright, so 5 to infinity would be 5 to positive 50. That would mean anything up here positive 50. Started with 5, right? Granted, is way down here. It does. So that's negative infinity. Got something, got something, got something. So negative infinity 5. Lowest to highest, yeah. Lowest number always has to be first and then your highest. Alright, I know for sure both of these are wrong. Because you got a negative infinity on the right hand side. Yeah, so, alright, so this will be 0 positive infinity, which is your x-axis. You don't care if it goes up or down, so 0 positive infinity. And then these two things, which are the lowest and the highest. Like that. Okay, so this one I know is wrong. Well, you've got the right thing, but the negative infinity can't go on the right hand side. You need to switch those, so it's negative infinity to positive infinity. These are not 0 to 10 is okay. This is not okay. Right here. Right here. This would be right if you stop at 10. So it's infinity, just like the decreasing right here. So that's going to be the same. All right, let's look at what we've got here. Okay. See how we're doing. Okay, so when we're doing domain, we start right here. That's at 0. Right? And then a lot of you guys are stopping at 10. Does the graph stop at 10? No, it keeps on going and you got that arrow. Now, what I saw a lot of you doing is putting a negative infinity. Okay? It needs to be a positive infinity because we're on the x-axis and positive infinity is over here. Okay? Now it is going down, which makes you think negative infinity. But is it ever going to be correct to do this, 0 to negative infinity? If you see this as the answer choice on that quiz, you can mark it out because it doesn't matter what question I asked you, that's wrong. Okay? You can't ever have a negative infinity on the right-hand side, right there. So 0 to infinity for domain. For range, okay, we're thinking about lowest up to the highest. So what's the lowest? Negative infinity, because we're thinking about the y-axis. So down here is negative infinity. Up to, what's the highest we go up there? 5. So we should have negative infinity to 5 for that. Okay? So range is the only time we're going to look at the y-axis, right? So we're thinking about, like, way down here, that's going to be, so when we're looking at our lowest point here, we are looking at the y-axis on this one. So that's going to be negative infinity. Range is the only time we'll do that. So, like, over here, when we were doing domain, it was going down, but we used the positive infinity because it was on the side. Range, we are actually looking at the y-axis on that. So we're going to use that negative infinity instead. It's easy to get mixed up. In second period, I did a problem and I put the wrong thing for it. So it's easy to get those x and y's mixed up. I meant first period. No, I just am old and forgetful. So increasing and decreasing. Where are we increasing? Nowhere. That's a none. This one does not increase. Decreasing. Okay? Where are we decreasing? Oh, Isabella just said positive 5. Negative infinity. Is that ever going to be correct? No, because negative infinity cannot be on the right-hand side. And Isabella was looking at the y-axis. That is a positive 5. This is negative infinity on the y-axis. But you got to do the x-axis. So if we're looking at x-axis, right here where we're starting, 0 to positive infinity. 0 to positive infinity. Okay? All right, now we're looking at positive and negative. Positive is here. All right, so for positive is above the x-axis. So it doesn't have to be increasing. It just has to be above that x-axis. So that, the x-axis is right here. So anything above that is positive. Even though it's decreasing, it's still positive. So this is positive. What domain does that happen on? 0 to 10. So 0 to 10, and I'm not going to be super duper picky, but you do need a parentheses with that 10 instead of a bracket, because at 10, you're on the x-axis. You're not above it, right? So you want to use a parentheses and not include it. All right, and then it switches to negative. So down here, we switch to negative because we're below the x-axis. So what would that be? Ten to infinity. And you'll use parentheses with both of those. With 10 because it's on the axis, with infinity because we always use parentheses with infinity. No? Look, they pay me to teach you guys math, not to give you nap time here. And at the end of the semester, y'all have to take an EOC, seeing how much you learned. And it matters for y'all, and it matters for me too, because they look at our scores and they're like, oh, Miss Hyatt, these kids learned so much. You did such a great job. Or they're like, oh, Miss Hyatt. They give us colors. We get red, green, or blue. I want to be blue. If we take a nap, we're going to be red. We don't want to be red. So, huh? You guys come in more time. Let's just do our work while we're here. Yes, I did have smart breakfast this morning. And I will have it tomorrow, too. So if you need a little help reviewing for that quiz or anything, please come by. I did not have any customers this morning. I told you. Yeah. Yeah, because I Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, I have smart breakfast. So come by if you need some help with anything. But no naps. Just for future reference, the answer to that question is always going to be no. So you don't need to ask it anymore. Eddie, is this question going to be related to mathematics? Or is it more related to Luis's question of taking a nap? No. Okay. What do you need?
Do they pay you based on what color you get?
No, not really, but like I think they have been like kind of looking at, some places have been looking at like giving bonuses and stuff, but it's not really like not all subjects are tested, so it's kind of hard to do that. So I do get a little bit of money if kids pass my AP exam or have the last couple of years, but not for the EOC. So, but we want to be the very best because I don't want to be red. Not in a long time. Yeah, not in a, I don't know if I've been on the lower end of green. I don't know if I've been red. I might have been red. If I have, it's been a long time. But I've been green or blue for a while. So, okay. So some of this is review, some of it is not. X-intercept. It is the point where the function touches the x-axis. Okay? And the y-coordinate of that point will always be 0. So when you hit the x-axis, the y is 0. And for the y-intercept, we're just going to switch those. For the y-intercept, it's when you cross the y-axis. And the x-coordinate is going to be 0. Miss Swisher has it this year. So we may shuffle some classes around because this year's schedule was based on, we didn't know Miss Swisher or Miss Baker was going to be up here really. So it will just depend on. Typically, I usually have AP Calculus and Pre-Calculus, and I would fist fight the others for those classes. But otherwise, we've kind of moved some stuff around, so it just depends. We've all taught about everything, well, except for Miss Swisher, who's been in 8th grade. But we may move it around. We'll see. But she's got 4 this year, but she's wonderful. If you guys had her in the 7th grade, most people agree. Absolute maximum is the highest point on a graph. The absolute minimum is the lowest point on a graph. So absolute maximum is going to be something like this. It's that very highest point. Absolute minimum is something like this. The very lowest point. Absolute maximum, absolute minimum. If we're talking about a parabola, we call it a vertex.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah. This applies to like all kinds of functions, so we don't always call them vertices. But for a parabola, you would call them a vertex. Yes. And then we can also have a relative maximum or minimum. A relative maximum or minimum might be a maximum might be a high point, but it might not be the highest point on the graph. So like, for example, if I have a graph that does like this point right here is a relative maximum. It is higher than the points around it, but it's not the very highest point on the graph because over here is higher, right? So this is, whenever this happens, it's a point where the function changes from increasing to decreasing. So if you change from increasing to decreasing, you're going to end up with at least a relative maximum. Sometimes it might be absolute. And for minimum, it's switched. It's going to be from decreasing your sleepiness. Did you not sleep enough this weekend? So, relative minimum would be like this point. All right. Alrighty. Okay. So let's look for these things. All right. So, x-intercept. What is the x-intercept for this graph? Where does it cross the x-axis? Nowhere. This is none. It does not cross the x-axis. You don't always have an x-intercept, but sometimes you have more than one x-intercept. But here, none. This is at -3, right here. What's our y-intercept? Okay, it's on the y-axis, it's -3. We usually like to give the coordinates of this point. So the coordinates of this point is 0, -3. So most of the time you're going to see it written as the coordinates of the point. Now, absolute maximum means the very, very, very highest point on this graph. What is the very, very highest point on this graph? Infinity. And infinity, can you ever actually get to infinity? No. So we would just say none for this because we would never give infinity as the answer for that because it's not actually a number that you can get to. So we would just say none for that. Same for minimum. We would say none for it as well. We don't have an absolute minimum because this just keeps on going and going and going and going forever down to negative infinity. Right. For absolute maximum and absolute minimum, we will get none. 0, -3 is our y-intercept. That's where it crosses the y. -3 is not a relative minimum. I like that. -2, 1 right here is my -2, 1 is my relative minimum. So right here, it's not the lowest point on the whole graph, but you do switch from decreasing back to increasing, right? It's a low point on the graph, just not the lowest. So that's a relative minimum. Now, there's also some debate in calculus on whether or not this point right here is a relative maximum. And it's maddening. In AP Pre-Cal, they would say, yes, it is. In calculus, you would not use the endpoint. We're just going to go with the most simple. We're going to go with the definition of decreasing to increasing. Do we switch from increasing to decreasing, or decreasing to increasing here? We're increasing and then we just stop, right? We haven't switched. So I'm not going to count that for us here. I don't think they're going to ask you that, like on the EOC or anything. I don't think they'll ask you about that point. We're looking for places where we just see a turn in the graph. Okay? All right, so let's do some where we're just going to do every single thing. Okay, we're going to do everything that we have learned so far pretty much. So all of this is like what you will see on the quiz tomorrow, but I will ask you the questions one at a time. So like if I give you this graph here, like I've got on example 9, I may only ask you for where it's increasing. Okay? Or I might give you the example 10 graph and I might ask for absolute maximum. I'm not going to ask you 7 things all from one graph. Okay? So we're going to practice this way because it lets us know everything about a graph. But tomorrow's quiz will only ask one question at a time. Because if you misidentify one point here, it's really easy to get all mixed up, and then you keep using that wrong number over and over again, and you miss over and over again. If it is a horizontal line, you would say that it's constant. So these lines are straight lines, but they're still increasing or decreasing, right? So let's start with domain. On this, we're going to do 9 together. All right, domain, we got -10 right here over to, I still exist here, right?
Yep.
Still exist here. And over here, where do I stop? +10. So I've got my domain here would be -10 to 10. Okay. What about my range? I like -4. I agree with that. What'd you say we go to? All right, so that would be, I'm not calling. That'd be from here up to here. Is that right? Where's the highest point on this graph? This is my highest point, right? And y-axis, 7. That's at 7. So -4 to 7. Do I use a bracket with my 7?
No.
I do not, because I have an open circle there, so I've got to use a parentheses. Okay? Now, all of these are just straight line pieces, so like each little segment is either increasing or decreasing. It doesn't switch on that section. Which one is increasing? The first one, second one, or third one? Second one. All right, so for that second one, I'm giving the domain of that second one. So x-axis is what I'm looking at. Where am I increasing? Who can tell me? 0 to what? 3. Not 7, because we want to use the x-axis. 7 would be the y-axis on that. It's so tricky, easy to get mixed up. But right here, range is the only time we look at the y-axis. The rest of the time we look at the x-axis to give our answers. Okay? So that means that our other two are going to be decreasing. So this section right here is decreasing. That is from -10 over to, what do I have at this point right here? 0. Not -4. How many of you were thinking -4 on that one? Because that's the one I missed earlier. I wrote down -4, which is wrong. 0. I caught myself once I went over it, but I put a -4 right there. All right. So x-axis, though, we're looking at x-axis is 0. All right, and then right here, it's going to be from 3 to 10. And we'll use brackets for those for the closed circle. Is this one constant anywhere? No. None. All right, when we're looking for positive, okay, that one's increasing, but there's more positive. What else is positive? The third part is also positive. So we would start from this point right here. What is the coordinate there? It's not 1. It's 0. And then over to this piece right here. What do I have there? 10. I want to use parentheses with both of those. For the first one, I use a parentheses because it's an open circle. For the last one, I use a parentheses because it's not actually positive at that point, right? Okay, so that's my positive. All right. Negative is the part below the x-axis. That's here. Okay, so that's from this point. That's negative 10. I want to use a parentheses there as well because at the x-axis it's not actually positive or negative. And then over to this point, 0, very good. I can use a bracket right there because it's a closed circle and it's below the x-axis. Okay. Next x-intercept, I've got 2 of them right here. I should put an S on it, shouldn't I? Because I've got negative 10, 0, and over here also positive 10, 0 for that. X-intercept, you might have more than one. Y-intercept, if it is a function, and that's what we're looking at here, functions, you should only have one of those. What is our Y-intercept? It's not positive 1 because that's an open circle right there. So that's not included. It's going to be right here at negative 4. So we would say that's 0, negative 4. Now it's important to see here, these, it's a little confusing. In other countries, they actually use some different notation sometimes, some places. These are points. Those 3 right there are points. So that does not mean from negative 10 to 0. It means the point, negative 10, 0. Whereas these are intervals like 0 to 10. This, if we wanted to, could be written like this. 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 10. These cannot be written that way. They're points for that. Okay? What is our absolute maximum here? What's the highest point on this graph? It's at 3,7, sort of, but what's there at the 3,7? Open circle. So 7, you want to say 7 is the highest number, but do we ever actually get to 7? So we got to think about this. When we're doing absolute maximum, we're saying what's the highest number. So like 6.9, that'd be pretty close, right? But what about 6.99? That could be, it's higher, right? And it's on the graph. What about 6.999? It's on the graph. What about 6.9999999? It's also on that graph, right? And we could continue adding 9s forever. So it's really, really close to 7, but we can't actually say what it is because it's an open circle, right? So we're going to say none. There's not an absolute maximum here, and the reason there's not is because it's an open circle. If it was a closed circle, we'd say 3,7 all day, and that would be our answer for that. But it's an open circle, so we're going to have to say none for that. What about absolute minimum? 0, negative 4. Perfect. That is this lowest point right here, and it is a closed circle, so we can say that that's the absolute minimum point. Do we have any relative minimum or maximums here? Do we switch from increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing? We do not, right? We have these big jumps where we switch, but we don't have a point where we switch, right? So we would say none for this, and it won't let me write down here because I'm like too low on the page, but that would be none. Okay, I want you guys to take a minute or two and try number 10 on your own. Okay, and if we go over to example 12, constant would look like this right here. This piece right here would be constant. And that does not happen on any of the other graphs we've seen so far. So it would just be a horizontal flat line. It's not going up or down. So we're not going to have any constant on this. Let me go back to our graph here. All right, so for your domain, you should have negative 11 up to positive 9. And you should use brackets with both of those. For your range, you should have negative 7 up to positive 4 and brackets with both of those. Increasing is this middle piece right here. So if you look at the x coordinates for that, it would be negative 6.5. Oh, let's use a bracket, actually. Bracket. That's one of those I won't really count off on. And 3.5 is our bracket. So decreasing would be this section and this section right here. So this first section is negative 11 up to that lowest point is at negative 6.5. And then we have to use that union symbol there. And then the other blue piece that I have here, it starts right here at 3.5 and goes all the way to the end at 9. Okay, no constant. Questions so far? All right, I'm going to erase this highlight that I have here so I can do positive and negative separately from that. So if I'm doing positive, that's everywhere I'm above the x-axis, which is just a section right here. So above the x-axis, this right here is at negative 1. And then it goes all the way over to this point right here, which is at positive 8. That's my positive section, from negative 1 to positive 8. And then the negative sections of this graph are going to be here, and this little tiny piece right here. So this first piece goes from negative 11 over to this point right here, which was negative 1. Oh, I should use a bracket right here, the parentheses here. And then over on this side, 8 to 9. Okay, questions so far? Okay, x-intercepts, I've got 2 of them. I had the x-axis here and here. So those would be the coordinates negative 1, 0, and 8, 0. Perfect. My y-intercept is right here. I know it's very, very small. On my graph, I think it looks like it's a little below 2. If you put 2, that's okay, especially since the graph is so little. I'm going to put 0, like 1.8 there. If you put 2, that's okay. I won't give you one that's going to be a decimal like that on the quiz, unless it's also multiple choice where you don't have to type in the answer. It's hard to get these graphs to not have decimals whenever you're making them on Desmos. All right, our absolute maximum is our very, very highest point on the graph. That's right here. So that would be at 3.54. Our absolute minimum is at this point right here. That is at negative 6.5, negative 7. And relative maximums and minimums. These points are definitely my absolute, but are they also relative maximums? Our definition for relative maximum is that we switch from decreasing to increasing, or increasing to decreasing. So while they are absolute, we could also call them maximum. I'm just going to draw an arrow here. Our absolute maximum is also a relative maximum. Our absolute minimum is also a relative minimum for that. Okay. We're going to skip the last two because we're just out of time, and I want us to do our activity that we've got. So, what we're going to do is, and we got, by the time we get in groups, you'll have about 10 minutes or so to do this. No.